with the establishment of huge number of research institutes all across the country with a scope of 1,000 people involved. Some estimates were about 60,000 people involved in the program. Deeply classified and included several special programs which were the most secret among all of them, including what I'm talking about. And what's interesting, and nobody took into account, that the special cover stories were developed. So the large number of people worked on artificial publications, on developing stories how to cover up the activities of such a large number of people. And the first ideas were to create psychoactive microbes, as we discussed it, to express different bioregulators as endorphin, a short peptide, well known in the scientific literature and in medicine. So the idea was to overexpress, to make bugs producing this kind of stuff, and put them into highly virulent strains of smallpox, other pathogens, plague, and so on and so on. And the program went on and ended up with this publication. It's a small piece of iceberg on the top of the whole program, but what's interesting here, it's an evidence that the agent of this type had been created and what kind of new properties it had. So the publication describes vaccine strains. So take into account that vaccine strain is the easiest way to see what peptide itself does to the infected animal. If you include the same peptide into a virulent strain, it would be very difficult to study it. So the recombinant strains caused reduction or sensation of pain and generalized muscular catatonia, which is essentially is a mental stupor. In simple terms, it means if person or animal gets infected with this, the perception of reality would be absolutely different. On top of highly virulent infection, that would mean that infected animals and people change their behavior, and they even cannot move properly because of the muscular paralysis. And the paper suggested to use Yersinia, which is causative agents of plague, to create these kind of agents further, to study further these possibilities. One more approach is so-called horror autotoxicus, when the microbe serves as a switch, a trigger, as I said before, and destroys, in this case, the shield which surrounds nerve tissue in spinal cord and in brain. So the result is the death of the individual after initial symptoms of infection. Then it takes a short while, about 2 weeks, and a new wave of symptoms comes. And that new wave of symptoms has nothing in common with disease itself, which caused it. So if somebody in a hypothetical case would contract this kind of disease and would have recovered from the disease, that would essentially mean not very much. The person would die inevitably because of the autoimmune reaction against his body against himself or herself. And that's a proof of concept. So what's been done in this case, vaccinia virus, which is inoculous viruses, but the same smallpox essentially in nature, has been created, and the small insert of myelin gene made this virus deadly. In the oval at the bottom, you see 0 from 42. 0 from 42, that's how deadly is vaccinia. No death at all. And 14 from 47 and 19 from 47, that's the number of dead and sick animals after inoculation of recombinant strain. And that's a typical example how pox virus could be created, and the virulence of this kind of agent would be up to 80–90%, taking into account that a natural virus kills only 30, maybe 40% of people. And it's been actually described how to create this virus in details, but nobody paid attention. Maybe it was a hint from Russians, look what we can do, how would you respond? But nobody responded for some reason. In late 80s, the work went further from creating smallpox to bacterial agents of the same nature. So a whole bunch of different pathogens have been tried, and what came out was quite unusual. Quite unusual because a very innocuous bacterium causing mild pneumonia, Legionnaires' disease, sometimes deadly, but not really that important for biological weapons, became so virulent that only 1 to 3 cells per animal were capable to induce autoimmune disorder. And the symptoms of this infection, again, were quite unusual. So in case of this kind of disease, antibiotic treatment would be very efficient. Within 2 days, almost all animals were paralyzed. And the plans were to go further and to do experiments on monkeys. And it was 1992 when the experiments were stopped. And I don't know any other data on these. I suppose all the data were transferred to the military facilities, and the program continued in different places. But what happened in this country, As I said, nobody cared. Nobody read literature. Well, I mean, what Russians published. And 10 years later, they decided that they were the first. I was glad to read this paper because, first of all, when I talked about the research which had been done in the Soviet facilities, nobody believed. Nobody believed that it's possible to create such a virus. But that's an independent data that it's really could be done. But unfortunately, 10 years later. What else had been done? You see, again, very explicit paper explaining how to create agents which suppress the capacity of human body to struggle with infections. It's been designed and kind of scientifically substantiated how to do it. Okay? And 7 years later, in Australia, the same principle has been confirmed. But this time, the work attracted a lot of attention.